Hi, my name is David Reski, CEO of NowSpeed Marketing, and welcome to this edition of In the Now, where we focus on uncovering the myths and misunderstandings of marketing and leadership with some of the world's most interesting people. And my guest today is Jim Johnston. I've known Jim for more than 25 years and worked with him at my first company, Onward Technologies. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thank you. This is going to be great. I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks. Jim was a fractional CFO for 22 years and worked with dozens of management teams to help his companies grow and thrive. And now he's an advisor to founders, CEOs, and boards. And Jim, with all your experience, we're going to have a lot to talk about.
Indeed. We could talk about old times.
Exactly. As you know, I like to start these conversations with a mythbuster question. And the myth we talked about is business in general is shallow. And it's really much more noble to go into a nonprofit, because that really is going to change the world more. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think I grew up surrounded by that idea to some degree. I grew up in a university environment. My dad was a professor, and I was surrounded by the University of Chicago, in the Hyde Park neighborhood. My dad was a physician and professor. His brother was. An uncle on my mother's side was a doctor. I had farmers in my background. And with all of that kind of intellectual, academic surrounding, I think I grew up thinking business was second best. And a lot of people feel that way, I think, even into adulthood. And I think the reality is, one, business is huge. Most people in this country are involved in business in one way or another. So whatever else it is, it's important and big, and it's going to always involve most of the population. Beyond that, though, I think business is creative. It is a place where freedom can grow at the personal level, and it's where value can be created. And I don't know how long an answer you want to this first question, but I do think that as we look at people making their choices in high school and college and early adult years, that it's very important for people to understand and be aware of what business careers have to offer individually to us and the role in society. And I guess I'll pause there, because I don't want your eyes to glaze over and for you to start to look at your watch and say, well, when is this guy going to shut up?
Yeah, no, Jim, those are really good comments. So let's just unpack those ideas one at a time. And so let's just kind of get to the kind of the heart of what your thought is here to start with. So it's this idea that, like, a nonprofit, often we think about like the environment you grew up with, nonprofit or human services, right? So
yes,
medicine, feeding people. It's really easy to connect those things back to direct human benefits. But business, you're in supply chain management, you're in shipping, you're making glasses for consumers, right? You're designing tech products, right? Sometimes it's hard to connect those things. So how do you equate the value that a business creates with, let's say, ordinary products with medicine or feeding the poor or providing goods for homeless children? So how do you make those things the same, or are they equivalent in any way?
Right. Well, just from an economist's point of view and how the economy works, most of the things you mentioned that we might consider noble, the benefit sector is sometimes called, or the nonprofit sector, mostly use wealth that was created somewhere else and is transferred into that sector. And we can see that with individual philanthropy, and we can see it at the societal level. But what we really want to ask is, where is value or wealth created in the first place? And the best simple measure we have of that is profit itself. And if you think about what is profit, profit is you use resources that have a certain value, you produce something, you sell it to people who willingly buy it for more than what it cost to create. And that difference is profit. And the measure of its value is their willingness to pay for it.
Mm.
And that's a pretty reliable measure. And so by your activity, you have created a profit. And that profit can be personally satisfying, and it also ripples through society to make all of the non-profit activities possible. They would not be possible if the profit hadn't existed somewhere, somehow first. Non-profit activities can be worthy, but there's no guarantee that a nonprofit organization is a net benefit to society just because it's nonprofit. In fact, it almost has to prove more, because a nonprofit uses resources that are more valuable, more costly than what people are willingly going to buy.
Mm.
That's the definition of nonprofit. And so you're starting from a point, you're using up resources, and it's not necessarily established that what you're producing is worth anything more than what you used up. It might be worth less.
Oh, interesting. So your assertion on the nonprofit, I don't really want to get to what you said about the value creation in a minute, but the nonprofit you said is that there's no guarantee that the benefit is worth what you're saying it is. It's almost like we have these moral judgments that I need to provide these services, and even though you're not willing to pay for them, you really need them anyway, because I morally believe you need them, even though you're
Right.
willing to pay for you don't value them enough to pay for them because you don't have the money or you don't want to pay the money. I just want to give it to you because I morally or intellectually or some reason that I think you need that thing, right? Yeah,
that's right. And for-profit and nonprofit organizations can both go off the rails, right? And do things that are not worthy and are not truly valuable to society and don't truly build lives and enjoyment and value. But I think the pretty safe presumption, David, is that a for-profit activity in which people are freely working in it are using up resources that can be measured as being worth less than what is being produced or provided. That we can rely on that pretty generally, that that's an indication that it really is valuable to society. Now, there can be cheating, there can be stealing, there can be people who value things that they really shouldn't value, that they've been they're making an error in how they value things that they buy. All of that's true because we're human beings. And there are businesses that do evil and do it by deception or by fraud. But most businesses that we work in and that we're aware of and that we use are not doing those evil things. They're providing something we want, and they're creating value by doing it.
So when I buy my Cape Cod potato chips, which I love,
yes, have you
almost every day for lunch, you might make the moral judgment that he's making an error in putting out that $3.59 for a bag of Cape Cod potato chips, and you may not want me to do that, but you're saying I'm getting value and I'm willing to exchange my hard-earned money for that bag of potato chips. and that's meeting a need, and that's good. And that's a good thing for them to be doing for me.
Well, I hope you're getting 2 or 3 ounces of potato chips for $3.59.
It's a big bag.
um, yeah, exactly, David. And if you think, well, there are people who know better. There are people who can tell you you shouldn't be eating those potato chips. Well, maybe so, but there can be a free marketplace of ideas. There can be parents teaching their children, and maybe your mother taught you don't eat potato chips, and you are violating her advice. I don't know, but over time, over generations, I think my trust is that people figure it out, and they figure it out because they're free to figure it out, and because they suffer consequences of their decisions and enjoy consequences of their decisions. And if we circle back to plug business into that, business exists to solve problems and to give us the potato chips that we choose to have. And sometimes, yeah, we do make bad choices, but we're not going to fix that problem by saying, oh, business is evil.
Right. So, Jim, you spent hundreds, maybe thousands of hours with dozens of CEOs who built companies, right? And are in this profit exchange, creating value, making that happen. And you've had the luxury of seeing the numbers. You see how the value exchange turns into profit or loss, or,
yes,
thrive and succeed, companies that go out of business, how to do that. In your experience, do the CEOs see it that way? Do they believe that they are changing the world and delivering real value? Or do they just say, hey, I'm just trying to rip people off and get as much money as I can so that I can build buy a bigger yacht? That's what it's all about for me. What do you see from on the ground with the CEOs?
That's a great question. I'm very tempted to turn the interview around and interview you about what your feelings were in those early days when we worked together, when I was 40 years old, and when you showed me a World Wide Web page in June of 1995 for the first time in my life.
Yeah, those were crazy days. And I remember when we were hiring an accounting firm, you insisted that they get an email address so that we could communicate with them.
And yeah, we were on a leading/bleeding edge. And I believe at that time you had 7 people working in your business.
Mm-hmm.
And we would talk about this new world and that we were going to help create it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so exciting to be doing something new, creative, valuable. And yes, you hope to make money doing it. That was part of the story. And to generalize your question, I think the great thing about business is you can have it all. You can be creative. You can be world changing. You can give people lives and careers and products and services that improve their lives, and you can make money doing it, which improves your life depending on how you use it. Now, if you waste it, if you do things that don't bring you real enjoyment or satisfaction, then yeah, wealth can ruin your life. It happens. I think I've studied a lot of owner entrepreneurs going back to my earliest days studying you. And I think there are 4 main motivations. Would you like me to say what they are?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Well, the famous one is to make a lot of money. And that is built into our culture. It's one reason that we make entrepreneurs our heroes, because we love that story of making a lot of money. And that is a motivation. Again, I don't think that's an unworthy motivation. Another on that list is to change the world, to have an impact that's lasting and that becomes a legacy and that changes lives. Another is to prove something. And often this is to prove something to your dad or to yourself or to the last boss who fired you, which happened to me at my early days. What made me self-employed was first to be unemployed.
Like many of us.
Right. And it wasn't my choice. And then the fourth is to be autonomous, to have an independence of freedom that you did not find as an employee working in other people's businesses. So those four: make a lot of money, change the world, prove something, and be autonomous. I really think about what is each different founder, each different entrepreneur's mix of motivations. What's the number one on that list? And how does that affect what the business means to them and where they want to take it? And just for example, if autonomy is your number one, as I think it might be for me, then you probably won't ever have a big business, because a big business subtracts from your autonomy. It makes you beholden to investors. It makes you dependent on employees and customers and market trends. And as I'm sure you would attest, many times a business is a much tougher boss. A marketplace, a set of customers, is a much tougher boss than any boss you ever had when you worked for someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been running companies for 30 years, and I don't relate as well to the autonomous comment, but
Right.
because I just feel always like I have to serve my clients,
Yeah.
employees, there's always something happening. So, but I could definitely see it as a motivation for many entrepreneurs.
Yes. And where that particular conversation often comes to a crisis is when you get to a certain size and you feel the autonomy slipping away, and you really do have to make a choice. And I help people make that choice, and I've worked on that choice for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, let's come back to the change the world comment, that motivation. And that one really resonates with me quite a bit, because we actually, I used to think, let me go back in our history, when you and I were working together in the 90s, I had a worldview that I wanted to make money so that I could give it away to
Right.
nonprofits. And we
Right.
ended up doing things for schools in Africa and AIDS research and bunch of other nonprofits, and that was very rewarding to me at the time. So I thought of my business in that way,
Yes.
even though I thought it was changing the world and doing some things. But recently, I've come around to a different philosophy, and that is that the business itself, our ad agency, changes the world through the work of our clients. And so last year, I
Right.
actually created
Yeah.
an award that we give every quarter. We call it the Change the World Award, and we've done this 3 times now, where we vote on the clients that are changing the world the most as a team, as our
Yeah.
employees define them, and they're all over the place, which is interesting. And then we give an award to that client as a way to tangibilize how we're changing the world. So that's kind of our way of doing that. But that has really helped me stay focused on this idea of changing the world, whether it's and I think, whether it's, some of our award winners right now are a healthcare provider in California. There's a medical device company in the Midwest. There's someone promoting wild spaces. It's called Live Wildly in Florida that got an award. So that helps me think about, like, stay focused on that. Do you think most entrepreneurs who are thinking about that are that tangible about it, or are they just focused on their product kind of getting into the hands of consumers? Do they think tangibly about it? You've worked with dozens of them. Are they kind of tangibly thinking about changing the world?
Yeah. I think there's probably two different dimensions on which this question operates. While you were talking about the companies you give your awards to, I was thinking, what about the avocado slicing tool that my wife recently bought? That's really cool, right? Every time we use it, we think, this is so clever. And I'm eating more avocados now because I just like using this tool that opens the avocado and slices it and makes it easy to eat. And so on one level, I think most entrepreneurs who succeed just think it's really cool to give something to someone that they want to use, that makes something a little easier or a little faster or a little better or a little more satisfying. And that could be a few more miles per gallon of gas. It could be slicing an avocado. It could be anything that's part of living our lives, from when we wake up to when we go to sleep, or maybe while we're asleep, something is going to improve our lives. And I think it's pretty hard to build a business if you don't have some of that feeling of just wanting to help people, wanting to please people, because you're going to do something for them that they will choose over the alternatives. So there's a zest for that, right? And I imagine you feel that yourself for your clients and for their customers. You just think, hey, this is a cool thing. I want people to know about it. And if advertising helps that happen, that's good. That'll be more good experiences people are having. Then there's the more cosmic dimension, which you were thinking of as a philanthropist, right? I'm going to change the world with big gestures and large amounts of money, and making institutional level kinds of changes with schools or hospitals or museums or the arts, health. And that's true too. That's a great way to operate. And it's driven by value or wealth that's created in profit-making businesses. That's the only source for those large gestures.
So in either of those examples, is there a right or wrong on that? Is it more right to make the avocado slicer that gives you a little joy or just makes it easier for you to eat avocados, versus helping people with, rare diseases overcome those challenges? Is there a moral better or worse in this, or are those the same? Or is it, even if they're not the same, are they equally okay for us to give our lives to?
I think they're part of an ecosystem that's complex and interconnected, and that, as in all ecosystem, it's the variety and the interaction that gives the best result. And so I'm all for some of both. And for the interaction, I think that I do think that the large philanthropic gesture has a greater chance of going wrong because of waste. It's a lot easier to waste resources. And you might have even come up face to face with that very problem when you were doing your philanthropy. You might have realized, oops, we just spent a lot of money doing something that actually did not make that much difference, because we misjudged what people actually would use or want, or what the alternatives were. But if you're doing the avocado slicer and you sell a lot of them to people who did not have to buy them, it's pretty much a guarantee that you've done something for them that they appreciated.
Mm. That's powerful, and you can really measure that. I think it comes back to that assertion: if we're building a home for someone who can't afford a home, do we really know that they want the home enough
Right.
to
Yeah.
use it?
Yeah.
Right. get the job and do the mortgage and do all the things that people who buy homes have to do in order to get the home, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas with the avocado slicer, we know that they really want it. Yeah. Interesting. Well,
It's pretty funny that we're spending so much time on avocado slicers.
well, I think about that all the time. It's a simple thing, but I look around my office and
Yeah.
I have a lot less things on my desk than I used to have, right? Well, as we all do. But I think about simple things like this, this glass. And
Right.
I'm grateful for the company that made this little glass, right? It
Sure.
lets me drink my water and
Sure.
and there's a whole production system that has to happen. There's
Right.
shipping, there's
Right.
glass production, there's raw material acquisition, there's transportation, there's retail, there's financial services. All of these things happen to get this glass into my hand at
Right.
this particular time, right? And when I break it, I can have a new one there tomorrow, maybe this evening. It's
Yes.
mind-boggling that our
Yeah.
system works that way, and that all meets my needs. And so
Right.
I think that I'm grateful for all these products that we have. And you're right, the financial exchange that I'm willing to give for that is a clear measure.
Right.
It makes our lives better. So yeah, so it feels like your assertion is that people shouldn't feel bad that they're in a profession that's producing legitimate goods and services that are really
Right.
meeting people.
That's right. And that's kind of at the societal level, right? What do we need as a society to be healthy, to be prosperous, to be free, to be efficient? But it operates at the individual level too. People can have very fulfilling, stretching, joyful experiences in businesses that seem ho hum. And people can grow and do grow doing things that meet ordinary needs. And I think the most fundamental thing that we're really talking about here is people's ordinary lives are valuable, are worthwhile. And if you provide something that saves someone a little bit of money or a little bit of time, and your first impulse is, oh, that doesn't matter. They've got plenty of time. They've got plenty of money. They don't need this. Or with a little more time or a little more money, they're just going to waste it. They're just going to watch more TV, and TV itself is a waste. What you're really expressing, if you go down that path, is a contempt for ordinary people and the choices they freely make. Mm. And that is not the way I want to go. I want ordinary, free people and the lives they live and the choices they make to be worthy and valued. And in an indirect kind of way, that goes back to the roots of your opening question, right? What is it about business that is not shallow, that is not unworthy? It's really that it's rooted in ordinary people's needs.
Wow, that is so powerful. So we can be arrogant and have contempt for the ordinary choices that people are making. We'd say, wait, I know better. You don't need that stuff.
Yeah.
You're better off without it. You should be not buying that, so I can take that money, I can give it to other people who I'm sure would need it, even though they can't afford to pay for it, because I know better. It's really, yeah, it's there is definitely an arrogance out there. Let me shift gears with that question just a little bit and ask you about the popular belief that we tell our children, or society tells our children all the time, that they should follow their passions.
Oh, yes.
Especially as they're getting, out of high school into college or choosing a career. Because your assertion is that it's worthwhile as in society for us to meet ordinary needs. If you're a cement finisher and you're making, glasses or, whatever you're making, these all meet real people's needs. But our society often pushes young people to say, follow your passions. And that often pushes them to big changes. I want to work on global warming, or I want to work on the environment, or I want to work on these big society changes. How would you talk to young people who are saying, I've been told to follow my passions. What should I do?
Yeah. Yeah. The most common career advice is follow your passion. And it's bad advice, especially if it's in isolation. It's inward looking. And the good advice is look outside of yourself at what's needing to be done. And often that is measured by what people are willing to pay for. Find something that needs to be done. And in most cases, outside of the nonprofit sector, which is an important sector, and by the way, a sector I put a lot of time into through my church participation and other ways, that willingness to pay is a reliable measure. And find in a conversation between what the world needs done and what you like to do and are passionate about and what you're good at, find something that connects those two to each other, then you're going to have a good life and you're going to make a contribution that's valuable. And that's the advice that we all need to hear and need to give.
Wow. That is, I think I could take that advice. We're talking about young people, but I could take that advice myself. Don't look inward at your own passions, necessarily desires. I guess we want to be aware of those, but really look at a need that needs to be met, whether it's ordinary or global. We can meet that need. That's where we can really find excitement and passion and feel like we're making a difference.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. And I found, and I think you and I both found this, is that in business does give you the creativity, the freedom, the flexibility, I found that entrepreneurship is really a path toward being able to meet needs in a very creative way.
Yes.
As long as you can make a profit and keep it going.
Yeah. And where I've spent a lot of my life as a chief financial officer is that nearly all businesses can quickly go out of business if they get it just a little bit wrong.
Yeah.
And that's one of the elegant aspects of business, is that it's always teaching you to do things efficiently and effectively and in a way that's rooted in reality. Business is reality. It's always bringing you back to what actually is true and not your fantasy. It just does that all the time for us. And I think it's good for us. And that getting it just right and making some profit versus getting it a little bit wrong and having no profit and going out of business, that is the guts of business. Right? And if you can't stand that, if you don't want to live or deal with that reality, then stay away from business.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the way you said that. It's grounded in reality. Well, Jim, this has been a tremendous conversation. You have taught me so much about business. You helped me stay grounded in reality through that first company and really helped me make a lot of good decisions and avoid bad decisions. And I'm very grateful to for all that you did that and then your friendship over the years. So
Yeah,
thank you for that.
I'm grateful. I've enjoyed it too, and I look forward to meeting with your group. I want to tell you, I have a little story to tell at that group that involves you and your company and running it month to month and a certain phone call with Silicon Valley Bank, which is no more.
Exactly. Yes, that's going to be a great story. Well, let's not tell that on the air now. Save that for our next individual meeting. But thanks, Jim. I really appreciate you taking the time for this. If people want to get in touch with you, if there's a CEO out there that could benefit from your counsel and your advice, how would they get in touch with you?
My website is johnstoncompany.com, and Johnston is spelled with a T, Johnston. And most of the content of the website is long form statements by past clients about what we did together, and then my response to what my viewpoint was of what we did together. So that's a pretty good window into what I'm all about and the kinds of people I've worked with.
It probably sounds like your website's an interesting read all by itself. But
yeah, well, your same two listeners are probably my two website viewers.
Jim, thanks again for taking the time today.
Sure.
Have a great day.
All right.